Time now for an in-depth look at the market news this afternoon, and for that I'm joined on the line by Dr. Sei-wan, professor of economics at Ewha Womans University. Professor Kim, good afternoon. Thank you for joining us today.
Good afternoon, Devin.
Well, let's start with the U.S. market on Monday. In the first session of the month, stocks were up, especially tech, though the markets are still way down so far this year. Netflix had a gain of about 4.8%, Meta 5.3%, and in the 2% range for Microsoft and Alphabet. What's the story in the global markets today?
U.S. stocks climbed Monday, and the yield on the U.S. 10-year Treasury note hit 3% for the first time in more than 3 years. The Dow Jones Industrial Average added 0.3%, and the Nasdaq Composite Index jumped 1.6% on Monday. The index is traded lower for much of the session, but turned higher in the last hour. With 4 months of 2022, U.S. stock market is putting in the worst performance in decades. In April, Dow Industrial declined nearly 5%. The worst monthly performance since March 2020. The Nasdaq Composite retreated more than 13% last month, its worst showing since October 2008. U.S. investors are awaiting the Federal Reserve policy meeting Wednesday for more signals on the pace of monetary tightening, with markets anticipating a rate increase of half percentage point to counter the highest inflation in decades.
Right, and Korean stocks today were up and down, but foreigners turned to net buying. Decent gains for some tech companies like Kakao and Naver, also some retail and consumer names. The KOSDAQ held on to its gains, but by the end of the session, the KOSPI was down. Tell us about the domestic market, Professor.
Today, the two domestic markets were mixed. KOSPI dropped 0.3%, while KOSDAQ added 0.6% today. Until early afternoon session, KOSPI gained over 0.2%, but KOSPI market lost momentum quickly in the late afternoon session. Recently, domestic markets are switching between positive return and negative return every day. But in the longer time window, it is true that domestic markets are adjusting to downside. Against last year's KOSPI peak, KOSPI dropped by 18% as of early May. Along with mixed market situations, large cap stocks were also mixed between gains and losses. Samsung Electronics advanced 0.3%, but second largest cap LG Energy Solution lost 0.2%. And particularly Hyundai Motor and Kia Motor both dropped 1.9% and 1.1% respectively. In KOSPI market, domestic institutional investors led the market drop with 214 billion won net sales.
Well, looming over all of this, Professor, the Korean won, it's been losing ground against the dollar, now to where the exchange rate is about the highest it's been since the global financial crisis, now at almost 12.70 to the dollar. Some are saying we could hit 1300 if the dollar keeps strengthening. Where do you see this trend going, and what does it mean if we do get to that level?
Korean won's weakness against U.S. dollar has accelerated recently due to the prospects of Fed's aggressive monetary tightening. Also, the volatility in the $1 exchange rate has amplified amid fears about the Federal Reserve aggressive rate hikes and economic growth concerns due to China's lockdowns. Korean government actually issued a verbal warning last week about the won's sharp fall. However, despite verbal intervention by finance minister, Korean won extended its losing streak. So some foreign exchange market participants began to expect that the new bottom line of $1 exchange rate would be 1,300 won per dollar in the near future. But I would say it is too early to set 1,300 became the new benchmark. Bank of Korea will keep step with U.S. Fed key interest rate hikes to avoid narrowing down interest rate gap between U.S. and Korea. So the capital outflow from Korea Korean market would be limited.
Well, 1,300 as the new benchmark would be a massive shift, Professor. Well, consumer prices last month's data now show rose by the most since 2008, 4.8% year on year. This is in large part, of course, because of fuel prices and energy in general. What do you make of this inflation number?
Consumer prices spiked 4.8% last month from a year earlier, accelerating from a 4.1% on-year gain in March. So Korea's consumer prices rose at the fastest pace in more than 13 years in April, amid soaring energy costs caused by Russia's war in Ukraine and a rebound in demand from the pandemic. According to government's analysis, most of last month's price gains were driven by a hike in prices of petroleum products and personal service costs. So this high inflation last month in April indicates inflation will continue its significant growth momentum for the time being.
Got it. All right, Professor, we're going to have to leave it there for today. Thank you, as always, for sharing your insights with us. We appreciate it.
Thank you for having me today.